This is Julianne Condia, host of Rewritten. Thank you so much for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Disarming Disability.
Oh, hello, and welcome back to Disarming Disability. My name is Nicole Kelly.
And my name is Sarah Tuberty, and we are your hosts of this really cool podcast.
We're so excited to have you with us. We're recording here on a weekend, and I was just hearing rumors about Sarah having a wild, cool weekend and was hoping she would share with you. Sarah, what have you been up to?
I'm excited. I'm back in Philadelphia now, which is just such a treat to be home. And I think really just recognizing and appreciating what home is and what home means. So we had a party last night. I'm living with a really good friend of mine, and his mom is, she grew up in the Philippines, and she makes so much food. So she threw a party yesterday, and it just was like constant food was being had all of the time. There was just like, she would make something and then bring it out on the table, and then we'd eat it, and then something else would just like magically appear and we would eat it. And so it just was so amazing to have all this really great food. So we loved that. And I'm dating somebody. He's a big deal. I'm really excited. His name is Eric. So he's my partner, and we've been dating since January, like kind of the end of January. And something that Eric loves, in addition to all of the fun things that he does, but his big hobby is music. So yesterday at our party, we met up with two of my really good friends, Sabrina and her husband, Matt. And then they're like, well, we got our instruments. Let's just start jamming. So Eric is on the bass and Matt's on the drums, and Sabrina and I are just sort of singing, and it's, 2:00 in the morning, and we're just playing Tool. And it was just so much fun, and just really how much my heart needs those moments, and how just happy I am being surrounded by music. I, of course, I need to go to singing lessons for a good chunk of my time and energy to be singable, maybe, I don't know, something to work on for me. But it just is really cool, because the fun thing is I met Sabrina, Matt, and my partner Eric all on the same day back in 2013. So Sabrina and I were sitting in rotation at the airport. We just hang out for 4 hours, and if you get called, then you go on a flight. If you don't get called, then you just go home. So we sat there from 8 a.m. to noon, and we didn't get used that day. And I was talking about like just moving to Philly, and I really liked science. And she's like, well, I don't have my kid today. Do you just want to go see my husband? He's working at the Natural Academy of Sciences in downtown Philly. Like, do you just want to go? And I said yes. And then he gave us this private tour, and we got to see like woolly mammoth teeth that like Lewis and Clark collected and like gave to Thomas Jefferson. I don't even know if they're around at the same time. I believe that's what the story is. But I saw these like awesome woolly mammoth teeth, and every time Sabrina goes into the city, because she was living in suburbs outside of the city, every time she goes in, she calls up her friend Eric, who she's known since, all of her high school friends then became Eric's roommates. So then that's how she knows Eric, and Eric is just like a solid, amazing person. So she called him up, and then, I'm on this tour with like Matt and Sabrina, and we're like turning around this corner, and like up these stairs walks Eric, and it just was really fun. I was like, oh, he's super cute, and I like him. And we became friends. But we didn't start dating until now, which is awesome. So it just was really fun to be like, yeah, I met all of you guys on the same day. Eric had thought that Sabrina and I had been friends for a while. Same with Matt. He's like, why would Sabrina show up with this girl she just met that morning? But I was just like, I need friends and people, and Sabrina's awesome. So
it sounds like such a Sarah thing. Like, you are someone who can like walk into a room and just be like, and we are best friends now. Yeah. It's a great talent to have.
It is. So it just was this really magical moment last night, just sort of like honoring our friendship and that we've all like been friends for 6 years, and just honoring that we all met on that day randomly, and Sabrina has been just so foundational to my life. And now she has 2 little girls, and and sort of how much our lives have changed, but this core of it hasn't, and just really appreciating and honoring that. And I'm just so grateful for all of them. They're all just like such great, fantastic people. And then we just jammed and played Tool as a way to do that.
So love it. There's a lot of Tool that is listened to at my house as well. Big Tool fans, lots of metal. Actually, Sarah, my favorite concert that I've ever gone to is, oh man, time is weird. I think it was last year. Last year we went with a bunch of our friends to a big Ghost concert. And so we are jamming to Ghost all the time around here. We're big fans. So I feel the affinity for how much fun that would be to just like sit and jam and chill and just hang and be with one another. And what special people surround you. I love that you have a good core group of people there that really like know you and know your heart. You know, that's so good. I'm so glad.
Me too. What have you been up to this weekend?
Oh, well, I actually, I got to do kind of a fun full circle thing this weekend. In high school, I'm sure you'll be surprised to hear that I was involved in like all the drama and on stage, not high school drama, but like the drama club, you know, like all the nerdy on stage speech and debate type things I was in the middle of. And one of the things that's really popular in Iowa is the Iowa Thespian Festival. And so you get together with all the other Iowa schools from around the country in November, and it's a big festival where you get to watch other schools do plays, and you get to meet other kids who are really into drama as well. And I got to they did a leadership day this past weekend and invited me to teach some sessions, which was so fun. So I got to come back and be like the cool older kid who now, you know, because I'm working at a fabrication company that does theater sets and museum work, you know, I'm still within that world. And I've worked, you know, in different professional spaces and interned in different professional theater spaces. So I got to be like the cool older sister who came back to talk to the high school kids, and it's really special. And it was a really special community for me in high school. So it was just a really kind of fun full circle. I got to come in and be big sister and talk to these kids and share with them. And it was a great time. It was really fun. I wish it could have been, of course, in person, but we're living in a virtual world. So it was over Zoom that we did it. But I don't know, it was really kind of a fun walk down memory lane, and also fun to like talk to the next generation and see what's on their heart and that they're still excited about theater and theater like things. So it was good. It was really good.
That's so fun. Oh, such happy hearts.
I love it. Great. Should we talk about sex now?
Yes.
Yeah, cool. If you've been following along with us, you know that this now is the third episode in our chapter all about sex. So we've talked about it from a sociologist perspective. We talked about it from a psychologist perspective. And now this week, we're going to talk about really concrete ways to move into spaces and really educate around sex. So, of course, we have an amazing guest because Disarming Disability is so lucky to have the coolest people ever come be our guests. So let's hop right in and let's hear about our guest, and let's hop into the interview.
Katherine McLaughlin is the founder, CEO, and lead trainer for Elevatus Training. As a national expert on sexuality, she trains professionals, parents, and individuals to become sexual self-advocates and peer sexual educators. She's the author of Sexuality Education for People with Developmental Disabilities curriculum. She has developed 2 online courses and a 3-day certification training. She has spent the past 25 years of her career committed to elevating the status of all people, which is why she has named her growing company Elevatus Training. Check out Disarming Disability's website to find out more about Katherine. Katherine, hello. We're so glad to have you here.
Can you please tell us a little bit about your professional journey? How did you get where you are today? And specifically, how did you become interested in sexual trainings?
Yeah. So I started working right out of college for Planned Parenthood of Northern New England in New Hampshire. And I'd always wanted to work for a place like Planned Parenthood. I liked the mission of the organization and the feel of the organization. And so I started started working in the health center there at Planned Parenthood, and then I became an educator and trainer. So that's sort of the beginning in my 20s. And I ended up working there for 22 years and loved just about every minute of it. But I also, early on when I was an educator, I had an accident and have a spinal cord injury. So I started using a wheelchair early in my, I was 26. So all of a sudden people were treating me differently, even though I was the exact same person, right? So if someone, I think, born with a disability, you have that experience your whole life, where I was able-bodied and then became disabled. So all of a sudden, I was like this different person. And so I think personally, I started wondering, like, well, what about sexuality and disability? And, some experiences that I've had when I was in the rehab for my injury and things like that. So I started to become sort of personally interested. And then at the same time, a lot of special educators were reaching out to work specifically with people with developmental disabilities. So I started that work, and I wasn't afraid of that work. I was really interested in that work. And there wasn't a curriculum, a sexuality education curriculum. There were a few out there when I first did this work, but I thought, okay, I want to start, I need to create a curriculum. There isn't anything, and a lot of people want to be able to teach these classes. So I started as an educator. This is sort of, my aha moment. I was like, okay, I'm the educator. I'm going to create the curriculum. I'm going to teach the curriculum. And I started working with Green Mountain Self-Advocates. So it's a group of people with developmental disabilities. And they were like, no, we want to be part of writing the curriculum. And we also want to be one of the teachers of the curriculum. And I was like, yes, of course you do, So that was a good, I don't know everything. So I started working with them, and the curriculum is designed to be team taught between someone with a developmental disability and a professional. So, sort of just different things come along in your life, right? And that's where my professional journey kind of has gone. And one big piece of the curriculum is sexual self-advocacy. So how do you advocate for yourself to be in a relationship, to have privacy, to ask for sexuality education, also in a relationship, how do you advocate for yourself as well? So that whole theme is threaded through the curriculum as well. So that's kind of and I did do lots of trainings and things. And then 3 years ago, started this particular business, Elevatus Training. I've been doing this on the side. I've had other jobs, and I would do trainings and sell the curriculum and things like that. And teamed up with a friend who's a business coach. And she, really helped me get some structure and how can you run a business around your passion. And so I've been doing that for, I think, almost 3 years, full time. So I've been able to make a career out of it.
That's amazing and so awesome and so much needed. That's incredible. Can you speak a little bit on what it was like working with the self-advocates and sort of maybe what were some things that you were finding in your training that when you were building the curriculum initially that then you maybe didn't think of, or what are some things that they really brought to the table that you're like, okay, yes, like these are components that are really essential to be built into our program?
Yeah. The first question I asked was, why do you want and need sexuality education? And, they had a bunch of responses to that. So I think that helped guide like what was important to them. I think part of it is that sexual self-advocacy, that self-advocates say that it's harder to be a sexual self-advocate than a regular self-advocate, that when they ask to get a job or live on their own, people go, okay, great. Yeah. What do you need to, let's write down your goal. Let's figure out the steps to getting there. But when they say, I want to start dating or I want to have privacy in my room, they get this sort of awkwardness. And so I think that definitely came up as an important concept, and that they also have to advocate for the right, where most people, the assumption is that you will be in some kind of a relationship as you grow up, right? I mean, maybe not everybody, but people with disabilities, the assumption is that they won't. And so sexual self-advocacy is saying, I want this. Even if I have a developmental disability, this is something that I want in my life. So I think that's a piece that was nothing I had used with the general population before.
I love that. And I love that you are bringing in specifically a toolbox, an educational toolbox, saying, here are concrete steps that we can talk about, you can talk about, we all can talk about, and ways to talk about it and ways to practice. When you are first encountering a group where you're bringing them this toolbox, what usually are the stigmas specifically associated with intellectual disabilities that you're going up against?
Yeah. I mean, I think that number one is that they're not sexual, that they don't have any desire or dreams, and so they don't need this information. So oftentimes I will be working with 50-year-olds with developmental disabilities that don't know how babies are made, right? I mean, just basic information. Self-advocates have told me that they were in the mainstream health class, learning about nutrition and physical activity. And when the sexuality unit started, they were removed from the class, right? So, I mean, right? I mean, who knows why exactly? I know. And I'm like, wow, this was maybe 10 years ago. This person told me this, it wasn't the 1930s that we're talking about. So they were actually removed, which is this message of you don't need this. This isn't for you. And so I think that's really the hard piece, is having people realize that everyone is a sexual being from birth to death. And sexual being doesn't mean you're having sex. It means that you have a sexuality. And so I think that's the biggest, is that certain people are sexual, not people with disabilities. And I think as a culture, we're not good at that anyway. We have a pretty narrow box of who we consider is a sexual being. So lots of people get that feeling of being left out of the picture of who is a sexual being. So, yeah. So I think that's it. Also thinking of them as children too. So, and I'm always saying that you want to base it on the biological age of the person. So if it's a 21-year-old with a developmental disability and a 21-year-old without, they need the same topics. How you teach might be a little bit different based on somebody's cognitive ability, but not what you teach, because biology happens and feelings happen, all those things. So they need the exact same topics. Mm-hmm. Where a lot of people might look at it and say, oh, well, their cognitive ability is like a 5-year-old. So we're just going to teach this 30-year-old what 5-year-olds need, which doesn't work, right? Mm-hmm. So I think those two, sort of thinking of them as children and not as sexual beings.
Right. That when we're talking about the sort of like it's not the 30s anymore and sort of not having access to sexual education or just health education. I mean, these are health topics. It reminded me of when I was in my disability studies through occupational therapy, that's when I first learned that like eugenics were happening, and sort of that disability, intellectual disabilities and developmental disabilities was a particularly group that were being forced into sterilization. So just sort of that's a history that we come from that's happened within the past 100 years, and how so much of that stigma still exists. It's significantly better than that, thankfully, but that's still like where roots of the stigma come from. Because sometimes I'm like, it is 2020. We should be over these things.
Right.
But we're not. And,
yeah. It's sort of like, it might not be to the same degree as forced sterilization, but it's still there in some ways, right? As sort of discriminating against people, saying they can't make their own choices. And another topic that I was thinking about too, when we were talking about what are some different topics, one of the pieces is just body autonomy and knowing that your body is your own, because many people with developmental disabilities are really taught to do what they're told. And so there's the self-advocacy movement is all about speaking up and you getting to decide what you want in your life. But there's when I'm working with people with developmental disabilities and I say, it's your body, you get to decide what's right for you. And then I might give a little pressure or something. They give in, they comply to me. And I say, no, it's your body. Like I do this name tag game where they can put their name tag on the left side or the right side. And then I say, well, I'm the teacher. I think you need to move it. And they start to move it rather than, no, it's my body. I get to decide what's right for me. I mean, that's good for all of us, right? So that's a big piece, is really helping people learn how to say no to authority and to say no to anyone.
Yes, all of that makes so much sense. And yeah, relating it back to, I feel like my experience with my disability, it has been taking steps to learn how to do that in situations where, big or small, where I am being told or directed in a way that people think perhaps is best for me. And learning to speak up can be, it can be hard, but it certainly is helpful, again, when you're given this toolbox and you're given the chance to practice the situations out loud. I feel like Sarah and I talk about that a lot. As much as you can set up children to know, okay, you're going to be in situations where people are going to come up and do the, oh, bless you, you're so extra special and God anointed you and all of these different things. Let's pray for your healing that you'll grow another hand back, right? That's a situation that Sarah and I specifically encounter, and I'm sure you have in your personal life as well, have encountered that. So the more that you can specify specific situations you're going to be in, you can give them that tool belt. So when it's happening, you can say, oh, wait, I have practiced this. I know that this thought process maybe isn't correct, even if that person thinks that it is. And here is my appropriate response to that, maybe to educate them or to advocate for myself or both.
Right. It does seem like that. I mean, you're just making me think of, just whatever disability it is, or any difference, when people make assumptions about you and push things onto you, how do you not have that get in? How do you sort of protect yourself from people's thoughts and beliefs? And not easy.
It's not easy. And I feel like the more that I've been able to identify them and isolate them, I feel like that helps me not only kind of compartmentalize them, but then again, be ready when that time comes. And which is why I love so much what you are doing, is you are bringing that toolbox into spaces for both educators and for those who need to advocate for themselves, which I think is amazing. So yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about your business? Sarah and I are a group of teachers today, and we have now hired your services to come in. What can we expect if we're sitting down with you either online or in person?
Yeah. I do different trainings, but in general, one particular training that I'm doing now is a 3-day training, and lots of teachers will come to that. And so what they're going to get are they're going to be able to work with 3 different populations. They're going to be able to teach people with developmental disabilities about sexuality. They're going to be able to lead staff trainings as well on how do you talk about sexuality one-on-one with someone with a disability. And then the third one is how do you lead parent workshops for parents on how do you talk to your own children. So sort of 3 ways of getting the information to people with disabilities. So they'll learn that. They get a curriculum. So you as teachers, you would get all the skills to being a good sexuality educator. You'd learn about things like how to figure out what your values are around sexuality and how do you set those aside so you're not imposing them on someone else, like one of your students. So that's something you would learn as a professional. As a parent, I do very similar skills, but I do say as a parent, you can share your values. That's your job as a parent, to share your values. Professionals really have to learn how to not share their values. And since we're in a culture that doesn't really talk about sexuality much, people often rely on their values as a way to teach. So they say, oh, don't do that, just from their values, rather than, well, what do you think about that? And, sort of how do you reflect it back to other people to figure out what they believe and what they think, rather than imposing your values. So the sexuality education is fact-based, not value-based. So we put facts. And we just have to be careful because sometimes we think something is a fact when it's actually a value. So someone might say, oh, when two people love each other, they have sexual intercourse and make a baby, right? Well, part of that is true. You don't always love each other, right? I mean, that's a value that versus like a fact, which is sometimes people don't love each other and have intercourse and have babies, right? I mean, that's true. So you have to always say, is this true? Is this a fact? Or is this my value? And I think that's hard for people to do. So that's a helpful tool. And then I give lots of tools on how do you answer questions, different models you can use that help you kind of answer questions, especially if you're uncomfortable with something, if someone asks you a question, there's a 5-step process that you go through, and it helps you kind of do a needs assessment and figure out what they know and what the question really is. And then you can answer it simply. And so tools like that as well for teachers, as well as, how do you create an environment in the classroom where people can speak up and ask questions and be who they are and not be worried or scared as well. Another piece with teaching people with developmental disabilities is there's a very high rate of sexual abuse among this population. I don't know if you heard the National Public Radio series on people with developmental disabilities and sexual abuse. And really, they looked at national crime statistics, and it looks like people with developmental disabilities are 7 times more likely than someone without a disability to sexually abuse, and women with developmental disabilities are 12 times more likely. So that's a big piece of, just how do we prevent that, and how do we give people, so you might have someone in your class that has gone through some kind of trauma, sexual trauma. And so how can you make your classroom safe, but also how to be trauma informed as well, which is another piece of the work that I do. So how do you make sure people know the topics that are coming up? Make sure you let people know that you're going to take a picture out of a body part, sexual part or something, sort of how do you create a space where people feel like they're safe, or as safe as they can be, and that they're not going to be surprised by something. So that's another piece of what I teach as well.
That's amazing. The statistics that you're sharing, are just heart-wrenching. And I'm wondering, and maybe there isn't a known answer to this question, what steps can we take as a society to help combat that? What is currently being done to try to address that? How do we fix that?
Well, first of all, I think it's really important to say that the reason that there's abuse is that people are abusing, and that the only way for it to stop is for them to stop, right? I think one way that people are trying to manage this is they are doing more background checks on people who are going to be working with people with disabilities. And then, we can also teach people what sexual abuse is and how do you speak up. And what do you do if someone doesn't believe you? The people that are most at risk are oftentimes people with severe developmental disabilities, rely on someone to do a lot of their care, and may not be able to speak up, may not be verbal, and they're really at risk, right? But I think, the more we can teach what it is, and that it's your body and you get to decide what's right for you. And it's okay to say no and get out of there. And, but yeah.
I'm wondering if you would be willing to share a little bit about your own disability journey with us. And with that, how that plays into the job that you do every day now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think I'll do the job part. I think one thing, because I use a wheelchair. So I think that when I'm teaching, I have, people with developmental disabilities feel like I understand them on some level, even though it's not the same disability, but I'm part of this club, right? And they're part of the club, and we're all part of the club. Mm-hmm. And so that gives me some credibility, and people have said, you really understand what I'm going through, or, so people feel like I can relate to them. So I think that's really helpful. I also think that when I work with professionals and parents, it does give me some credibility as well, around just disability culture, which a lot of people don't know a lot about disability culture. And so I'm oftentimes teaching people about the language that you want to use, and, what's the sort of current thinking in the disability community. So I think that really helps in my work as well. So I've got some credibility, I think, for that. And I think, just sort of my own journey with disability, as I mentioned, I was 26 and all of a sudden was using a wheelchair. And, I think, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was really hard in the beginning. And now, I'll say to people, I rarely think about it, but I think it's been so interesting just how I'm treated, and how I have two kids who are in their 20s, and I had them after, I had them as a woman in a wheelchair, and just some of the things, that people said along the way are amazing. I mean, not in a positive way, but, when I had a baby, one of the nurses said, "Have you thought about how you're going to take care of it?" And I felt like a teen mom, like just this assumption that I couldn't take care of this child. Or people ask, like, was I in a wheelchair because of the pregnancy versus like being in a wheelchair and deciding to have a baby. And, so just the assumption was that a person with a disability doesn't decide to have a baby and, do it the regular way too. So a lot of those messages I think I got. And I think some of the other ones, and you may have had an experience like this as well, but I remember getting out of my car, and I take my chair apart and put all the wheels on and everything. And someone was getting out of their car, and she had a big leg brace on. It was like a temporary thing, that she was struggling with. And she said to me, "I was feeling sorry for myself until I saw you."
No.
Right. And I said, "What? I'm fine. What are you doing?" So this idea that my life is so awful, I feel like there's a lot of that. And a lot of like, you're a hero as well. Like, oh, you're amazing. And I just feel like we're all heroes, or none of us are heroes, like, what I'm talking about. Yeah. So I think, and also just like questions, and I don't know if the two of you get questions, but really personal questions, like what happened to you? Like that's personal. And I don't think there's sort of no boundary with people with disabilities, sort of like the pregnant woman that touch their belly, right? You'd never touch anyone else's belly. And so that's always surprising to me when people say, "What happened to you?" Like I'm going to dig up all this, these past things and tell a stranger. No.
I would say these are the exact like moments and encounters that I feel like
even in talking about the work that you do, but like in our daily life, we have to have those tiny moments to learn how to advocate for ourselves. And no, I don't want my teacher told me to move my name tag, but I want to keep it here. So I'm going to speak up for myself. You know, you have to be ready in those moments. And, but also so many of those microaggression moments, that is constantly the world telling us how we think we should be seen, right? Because the rest of the world is seeing us in that way. So, it really does. I feel like, especially in the work that you're doing, it gives you such an advantage, because you're right. It's not always exactly the same thing. It being intellectual disabilities, which comes with a different kind of Rolodex of barriers, but still that idea of stigma and that idea of just like ridiculous questions coming at you. You don't just get it, you get it. Right. And I think that's so valuable for you to have in your toolbox. And I'm so glad that you can bring that into the trainings that you have. Because you do have the compassion and empathy that goes along with it. That wasn't a question. That was a comment. We want to be respectful of your time. So is there anything that you feel like you haven't had a chance to speak to or about that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered a lot of it, but I mean, I think one of the things that I'm always sort of making sure comes to the top is, you know, lots of times people will think that all the work I do is with professionals, but you know, people with developmental disabilities are learning how to be sexuality educators as well. And I'm working in Michigan, and we've got all these teams trained to teach sexuality. So, I mean, that whole idea of someone with a developmental disability being one of the teachers, and what does that do for you as a person in the class, you know? And I'm always trying to put self-advocates, like I'll say I work with self-advocates, parents, and staff, because I feel like they're really the ones I want to reach, either with information about sexuality or with like, you can be part of the solution, and you can be a teacher, and you're a leader. And yes. Yeah.
Well, so much for giving us a whole chunk of your time here.
You're welcome. Thank you both. Keep in touch. It's great to meet you.
Have a good rest of your day.
Yes. Thank you for spending part of your day with us. We want to give thanks to our network, Public House Media, for our intro beats to Jason Bartz with Cybernetics. Our logo art, we want to remember Patrice. You can find his work at normalpersons.com.
Be sure to follow Disarming Disability on Facebook and Instagram. And lastly, be sure to check out our website, disarmingdisability.com, where you can find all 13 episodes of Season 1, links to resources, transcriptions, and discussion questions for each episode. And check out our blog, where we feature amazing disability advocates. See you next week.
Bye!